A lot of marriages don't go through because of caste, though. That's much more important.
And it's still very important.
For marriages, it's still very important.
Even in, let's say the family is very modern, do they care a lot too?
No, modern families do not, but more conservative families they do. Like my family really cares about this type of stuff. They won't care about it in everyday life, but when it comes to marriage, they're like, we want this caste girl. Like, why the hell do you care about this?
And if you
But
don't get someone from that caste, would they veto it?
yeah, pretty much.
How much say do the parents have? Let's say a conservative family like yourself.
Not that much say actually. A lot of say goes to the grandparents and the older people in the house, right? So the way
Okay.
it works in joint families, like where you have grandparents and a bunch of other people living, is that decision that's made for marriage is a bit of a family decision, not just your decision, because the
Hmm.
girl ends up moving in with your family, not just you, and they have to live with her as well. And they typically make good decisions on your behalf. Like you rarely hear of them fucking up. A lot of divorces happen when the guy just marries some chick the family doesn't approve of. But
Okay.
when a family picks a girl, they make sure that everything lines up. So in most cases, there are no problems.
Hmm. What's the likelihood of a conservative Indian bringing home a white person?
Low.
Very low. If that did happen hypothetically, would that be an issue? Because technically they're not in any caste.
Yeah, so that's considered worst. Like,
That's considered
have you?
worse.
Yeah, that's considered the worst of the worst in the sense that there are the four castes and there are people outside the caste system. And the people outside the caste system were treated horribly. When I say horribly, I mean like in extremely humiliating and horrible ways. And technically, if you are a foreigner, you are outside the caste system. So technically, you are supposed to be treated in that horrible way, which, of course, as I and most modern people do not agree with. But you ask all these like grandma type people, they grew up in a completely different environment than us, and they're like, I can see that. They're more, what's the word for it?
Traditional.
They 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 do reject this culture nowadays, like this whole, you're supposed to treat a lower caste person differently, but their rejection of it is not as strong as say my rejection to it. Like I would dismiss it entirely. I don't give a shit about caste,
Are you
but
going to enforce that with your kids?
I would not. I mean, I don't know until I'm given the option, but I would be highly surprised.
Okay. Man, I didn't know that the casting was that big in certain families, even
it
nowadays.
it used to be very big earlier. Nowadays it's not big in anything except for marriage, in the sense that earlier you could not even be friends with a lower caste person, or you could not touch them or eat from their plate or drink from the same tap as them. Nowadays there, there's no restriction like this. No one cares, except when it's time to get married, then suddenly it's important.
What's the highest caste? Brahman?
In Hinduism, the highest caste is a Brahmin, and in Buddhism, the highest caste is Kshatriya, which is the kings.
Okay, let's stick with Hinduism real quick. And what's the lowest caste in Hinduism? Is it
A
Sudra?
lowest caste is a Shudra, yes.
Okay, has there ever been a time where the Brahmin was broke and the Sudra was rich?
Historically, Brahmins have always been broke. Even today, I think about 50% of Brahmins are below the poverty line. Brahmins are not supposed to have money in Hinduism. Like they're supposed to be satisfied with very little and focus on their austerities and what have you. And they're not supposed to be greedy or want money. So
Hmm.
historically, Brahmins have been broke, except say in the last 100, 150 years, where some Brahmins got some more money because they started taking more money. But if you were to study history, Brahmins have been extremely poor in most cases, living in bad conditions and what have you.
So the caste system, it serves as a filtration system pretty much for your family line. It's not necessarily factoring in economic growth, wealth, etc.
Exactly. Like I told you, right? My mother's family is extremely well connected, much better off than my father's family. But my mom and father, dad still got married because hey, same caste, the guy is educated, get married.
Interesting.
This would not
Closest
happen today. Like nowadays, they care much more about economics than they care about caste, but they still care about caste.
the closest I've heard about this is I knew this guy in the U.S. His name is Rahul. I'm not gonna say his last name, and he is so whitewashed. But whenever there's this major Hindu ceremony or festival, suddenly he becomes super Indian. He'll do the Diwali, the Garba, everything, and he always hypes up his caste. Uh, I believe he's a Brahmin, so he'll say it like that. He'll say, "Well, I'm a Brahmin, so only Brahmin girls can talk to me." And it's hilarious because he's not culturally connected at all, but he'll be culturally connected only when it benefits him.